Mhm. I've been doing this stuff professionally for 20 years. If I had to get up and do a piece for you all, I would still be absolutely terrified. Oh yeah, without question. Hmm. All right, let's see if we can see. So, yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Kara.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
If we give us a second to get everybody into the frame a little more,
Right.
so you can.
Right.
We have to be like eating the computer for you to hear us.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But they're each going to come up individually to ask questions.
Okay.
And I have it sort of framed up so you can see us at least. And
Okay.
we have the computer hooked into a speaker system, so like we can hear you just fine. We got a projector on so we can see you great.
Awesome.
But I know the last time we did this with Dan Burke a couple of years ago
Nice.
with our seniors, and we watched the video afterwards, and we couldn't hear ourselves like at all. Like pretending to hear us and then answering the questions for us, and it went great. So he really handled it great. But this class saw that video, and I was like, you know how that. So I told them, I was like, come up to the computer and pretend you're talking to a deaf grandparent.
All right.
And we'll probably hear each other a little better.
So. Okay, sounds good.
I need to get like a microphone or something in here. But
yeah.
We're that's not what we're here to talk about. So I'll pull up the questions too, and then we'll get started.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's exciting to even see the theater room right now.
Nice. It's not that different. Yeah, we've added some things really, but we didn't change the general vibe.
Yeah.
Where did I put these? There they are. Okay. And there.
Awesome.
Our first person coming up is going to take Autumn's question. Come on up, Frank.
Hi.
Hi.
What's up? I'm Faye. So this is actually someone else's question, but they're not here today.
Okay.
So she wants to know, what's your fondest memory from CASA?
So when I read this question, so much came up. Of course, Mr. Wendling. Mr. Wendling was always my favorite. And Mrs. Ryder's class was like a really, it was a really awesome class for me. Because, you know, I came into CASA for my senior year after being in public school for everything up till then. And I wasn't doing great when I decided to come into CASA. I had never really had an experience in school where I felt like I could be myself. And so coming in and meeting people like Mr. Welling and Mrs. Ryder and being able to be myself was amazing. But I do have like one singular memory that popped up. I took Mr. Boyer's guitar class. I don't know if he's still there. I don't know if you guys know him. But I took the guitar class, and at the end, he basically was like, all the seniors have to perform something that you learned in this class. And I was so nervous. And so he got up and he played Falling Slowly from Once, and we like sang the duet together. I think that's definitely my fondest memory from CASA. He saw I was really nervous, and so he just got up and he did it with me.
Awesome. Cool.
Okay. That's super sweet. I was just talking to him like an
Yeah.
hour ago,
Yeah.
and I told him we were doing this, and he was excited. So
Yeah.
I was sitting there, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna tell him." She name checked him in the Zoom.
Yeah, tell him. That was a great day for me.
All right, next up is Rain.
Rain.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I have a question, and it was, how was the transition for you to go from recent high school graduate to basically on your own in New York?
Yeah. So that was obviously a tough one. I moved at 18. I moved in the beginning of August after I had just graduated in June. And the thing that was, a little unconventional about my move is that I did go to a conservatory and it did not have any dorms. So when I moved to New York City, I moved to New York City. I had to find the apartment. I had to find all of it. And so my first few months here, I couch hopped. I lived with nuns for a month in a convent. I have lived in so many different neighborhoods. I've lived in Queens and Brooklyn and in Manhattan. And I think, your first 6 to 12 months after you move, especially if you do plan on moving to a big city, is really about like flexibility and adaptability. There is a lot that is out of your control. And you kind of are faced with this choice every day as this, kid, basically, still in this huge city by yourself. You're given this choice to either go with the flow and adapt to whatever the day throws at you, whatever the city throws at you that day, or stress over the fact that you can't control it all. And so for me, when I moved here, I don't know if this resonates with any of you, but I didn't really have the money to be moving to New York. I couldn't like get a nice apartment, all these things. I had to do everything in a really like flexible way. And it took me 4 months before I actually settled into my first apartment that was like mine for a year. And then it took me like, I'd say a good 6 to 12 months to actually adjust to living without my parents and like living living in a place that was not Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, basically. And the good news is, I wrote some of these things down. The good news is, what I learned is that there will always be people to help you. You will move and you will know no one on the first day. And by the end of the first week, I guarantee you will know people who know more about you, who know more than you about where you are, who have resources to help you, who can point you in the right direction. When I first moved here, I had people helping me every step of the way, from as small as like asking a stranger on the street where I can enter the subway, to people I had met at school giving me their couch or their extra room for a week while I was in between places. So, the good news is there will always be people to help you, no matter how shy you are, because I'm very shy as well. And once you do settle down a bit, the biggest things that I learned from the transition from living at home at 18 to living by myself in a city at 18 was, once you're able to actually settle down in a space that's yours, making your space a space that you love is one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself when you're not at home anymore. Having a space that is, I have, my trees here because there's no trees here in New York, like that kind of thing, making sure you feel comfortable in your space, who you're living with, the furniture you have, keeping it clean. That will set the tone for every single day you wake up and you try and go do something that you've never done before. And then the other big thing that I learned in that time is that while there will always be people to help you, it is totally okay to experience something on your own. I had to learn that really the hard way. I think with, our social media and, driving around Harrisburg, driving around with your friends, all these things, it's hard to think of your experiences that you have by yourself as being as valid as if no one sees it, did it really happen? And I think when I first moved here and I was still making friends, I learned how to be my own company, and that didn't make any of my experiences that I was having any less valid, that no one saw them. They were just, they were for me. And so those were the two big lessons I got out of that first year of transition.
Thank you. Come back. Jonathan's coming up to ask a question for another student who is absent today.
Okay.
And he's pumped.
Okay.
Oh, now I just messed it up. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm here to ask a question from a student that isn't here.
Okay.
And she asked, what are some boundaries that you have when it comes to acting?
Right. So this question is super mature, and I'm really glad that you guys are having this conversation now. I know that a lot of people, when I did start training after high school, were really shy about this question, or either it just wasn't really talked about. It was something you kind of keep on the hush hush, or it's not something that you ever come up against until you're asked to do something you don't want to do. For me, I mean, it's pretty simple. I'm still pretty young. I just turned 23 this summer. So as of right now, I don't do any full nudity, and I don't do any simulated sex scenes. But something that has changed for me from when I graduated high school to now is the idea of playing bad people. And so I wanted to talk about the idea that every script, right, if it's going to have conflict, it has to have a problematic character. And those characters could be problematic in an interpersonal way, which is what happens a lot. They get into a fight, they're friends, that kind of thing. But that person can also be problematic in a societal way. There are characters that are racist. There are characters that are homophobic. There are characters who say vile things. And I think when I was first moving here to New York and I would really shy away from that type of stuff. I would really link it to myself, oh, I can't say those things, or I don't feel comfortable saying those things. And I think that, I wasn't comfortable then, so that was fine, and I shouldn't have done it then. But I do think that over the past few years, it's become more clear to me that there's a reason there are problematic characters, and there's a reason that things happen on stage or on screen that make us uncomfortable. And the more you can the earlier you can start this journey of separating yourself and who you are from the person that you are portraying and what they're doing and what they are saying, the more solid you will feel in any role you do, but especially when you're asked to do these things that societally are not, that are problematic. So for example, there was a one act that we did at Atlantic, and there was basically you do a whole night of one acts and you all audition at the same time, and then they split you up into these like 2 to 3 person one acts. And one of the one acts had like a racist family member who used a slur. And there was this huge problem amongst our company where no one wanted to do it. Like people kept getting cast in it. People kept being put in the role, and then they would say, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want to say that. And it really boiled down at the end, once like 3 people had denied the role, it boiled down to the end of like, all right, well, like, let's have a conversation on why we don't want to do this. Is it because we're judging ourselves, or are we judging the character? And if we're judging the character, the question that we can always get to is like, why has the writer chosen to write this person the way that they are? Is there meaning to it? Does it progress the story? Does it prove a point? Does it cause conflict? And when you're able to pinpoint why that character is doing the problematic action in question, it becomes into a scene study. It turns into a scene study. It no longer is, I don't want to say that. And it turns into like, well, why are they saying that? And so that's, in terms of boundaries, that's something that's really shifted for me over the past few years.
I agree. I think that's a very mature question. And I was excited to see it. I was like, oh, I'm putting this in here. If we have time after we get through the list, if there's more questions they developed, and they may have other questions. See, we'll get back to this one. That resonated with me, your response to that, Kara, because I felt like I had a similar journey at a similar age. I remember my acting teachers telling me frequently, like, we can see your hangups about what the character has to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like trying to coach me past that. And it was like intellectually I knew what I had to do, but I couldn't like get beyond that personal blockage somehow.
Self from it, your like sense of self.
Yeah. And then just it was like time and more training and just getting to a point where you can separate yourself from it. But like I'm doing a Zoom thing tomorrow, and the character I'm playing in that is a jerk. He's awful. And like we did like a 3-hour rehearsal of it a week ago, and Alexis and Rosie are doing it too. And after the rehearsal was down in the kitchen with Alexis, and I was like, I do not like this guy. I don't feel good being in his skin for 3 hours. But it's like I'm at a point now where I can at least do the thing, and then like acknowledge it afterwards and let it go somewhat. But it still can linger sometimes too. You can get skeeved out by a character, and
you don't have to love every character you play. We romanticize it so much. We romanticize being in a show. We romanticize like taking on a new role. You do not have to love that character to be loving what you're doing. Those are 2 separate things. You can love getting on stage and performing in that show without loving every single thing your character says and does.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about your experience at the Atlantic. I remember when it was founded and reading up on it over the years. It seems like a really neat place, and but you have firsthand knowledge, and I just would love to hear your perspectives on your time there and your training and any stories you want to share or anything like that.
Yes. So is the CASA theater curriculum still set up in a way where you learn a plethora of techniques?
Well, we dabble in a wide variety.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I don't know if you've gotten to this yet, but Atlantic Acting School teaches practical aesthetics. I like to think of practical aesthetics. It's kind of like acting for, it's like scene study for people who are a little more left-brained. There is more of a formula to it. And there is more analytical, critical thinking that goes on in the scene study. It's less about your emotion and it's more about motivation. That being, so that's what Atlantic is. I absolutely loved my time at the Atlantic Acting School, but I do realize that it is not for everyone. It is a conservatory training program, and even within the conservatory training programs are inherently more rigorous programs than college programs because they are shorter. So you're doing a lot more in a much shorter amount of time. And then even on top of that, Atlantic is known to be one of the more rigorous, disciplined programs. And that is actually why I chose it. I am someone who, if I went to go get a BFA and I was in a college and they didn't make me come to class, I would not go, I would sleep. And so I knew going into like my college search, my senior year, I knew I needed to go somewhere where I would be held accountable. I knew I needed to go somewhere that had a lot of discipline, or else I wouldn't be able to fully commit to it. So conservatory training, just for a broad idea here, is about 40 hours of class a week. It's a full-time job. On top of that, you also have rehearsals and you have crew assignments and you have homework. And then I also worked a part-time job on top of that. So you are choosing a very specific lifestyle that requires you to be out of your house at like 7 days a week. Everyone who was in the conservatory had to work during it. A lot of us did. And, you know, conservatories are very specific. When you're going to a conservatory, unlike the program you're in now at CASA, or unlike a more generalized training program at a college, you are going to learn one specific technique. You are going to learn it from the people who originated it. So, like Mr. Campbell said, he remembers when it was founded. It was founded in 1985 by a playwright named David Mamet and William H. Macy, who you guys know from Shameless. And so now the draw to going to Atlantic or going to any conservatory is that you're learning the technique from the place it originated. And so that is why I chose to go there. On top of the rigor, I really identified with practical aesthetics when I learned it in CASA. It made a lot of sense to me. I also learned it at Open Stage from Ann Alsadek, and it made the most sense to me. So I worked really hard to go to Atlantic. When I was entering, it was not as normal for high school graduates to be going into a conservatory program. That has changed drastically. The ages in a conservatory program are going to be anywhere from 18 to like 38. So you are mixed in with people you would have never met otherwise. They're from all over the world. That was one of the greatest parts about being there, is that I met people I would never, ever have met otherwise. But now, yes, it is a lot more attainable for graduates to go straight into a conservatory program. Age is less of a factor at this point. And then the thing that I really like about Atlantic, which I think that you guys will resonate with as well, is that it is a lot like CASA in their views on collaboration. So you guys are in integrated arts. I don't know how that's going to happen this year with all of your masks and all of that, but you guys are in integrated arts. The idea is you are creating your own work. Atlantic's slogan, like literally, that's like beaten into your head, is create your own work, create your own work, create your own work. And so coming from classes at Open Stage and integrated arts at CASA, finding a place where I would be creating instead of just learning lines and putting up scenes was a really big deal to me. And that goes down to like how they teach you how to do everything. They teach you how to motivate yourself. They teach you how to find jobs for yourself. They teach you how to do your finances yourself. They teach you how to basically take charge of your own life, and they give you the tools on how to work with other people across different disciplines so that you are never just waiting around for someone to cast you. You are taking charge and you are creating stuff that is your own, in whatever way that means. So that was definitely one of my favorite parts about Atlantic. And specifically, we do this thing called a through line. And a through line is where, from an acting standpoint, it's the first time you're mapping an entire character's journey through an entire play. And so you pick a play where you can play the protagonist. I did How I Learned to Drive. I don't know if anybody has read that, but yeah. You started as just the actor, you're mapping somebody's whole journey, and then it's a whole semester class. After you've mapped the whole journey as an actor, what you do is you pick 20 minutes of it that you cast, direct, produce, rehearse all on your own, and then you present it at the end and you act in it as well. So they're really teaching you how to take charge and tell a story in ways other than just the lines. And so that was one of the key moments at Atlantic for me.
Thank you. That's helpful. I've read some of Mammoth's books, and I've never like done direct training in that. But I see a nice connective thread with Stanislavski to Meisner to Mammoth. Like they seem to coexist nicely.
Yeah. So if you guys have done Meisner and repeating, right? Basically, David Mamet went to Meisner's conservatory. Specifically, it's called the Neighborhood Playhouse, which is another great program. And he learned Meisner from the source. And then he got cut after the first year. Basically, he got cut from the program. And he got really mad about it. And he was like, okay, fine. I'm going to go make my own thing. I'm going to make my own thing. And so he basically took what Meisner essentially is, which is repetition, back and forth, like reacting instead of creating is the difference. I'm not creating any emotion. I'm reacting from the person who's across from me. He took that and then he added what I was talking about, an analytical scene study. So there's two parts of practical aesthetics. The first being that very analytical scene study to prepare you to go in, and then basically while you're in the moment, while you're performing, you've done all that work, and so you can go straight into just repetition. So that's where that stemmed from.
Thank you. We have Elira up next with a question about New York.
New York.
Hi, my name's Alana.
Hello.
Okay, so my question is, why did you choose New York? Is that where you thought that you would have the most opportunity?
Yes. So I actually, when I started looking at colleges, my plan was to move to Chicago and go to DePaul University. If you guys do want a college degree, I would highly recommend looking at DePaul. It was my top choice. I ended up choosing New York not because of the city specifically. It wasn't like I was choosing which city I wanted to go to and then I would look at schools there. For me, I ended up in New York because the conservatory training that I wanted was here. And since I got here, I've totally fallen in love with it, and it is my home. It is definitely my home. But yeah, I would say that especially this may change after you get out of your higher education training, but for higher education training, I don't think there's a right city to go to. I don't think there's some place you have to be right away. Perhaps after your higher education, that becomes a lot more true, that you have to be in a certain place to get work and opportunity. But for your higher education, it's about going to the program that you think you are going to benefit the most from. But since I did move to New York, I can tell you a little bit about what it takes to live here. Essentially, I touched on it a little bit with, not a lot of things are in your control here, from the subways to, the crappy apartments you sometimes find yourself in. Not much is in your control. So you do have to be someone who can practice flexibility, who can, or is open to learning how to be flexible. But really the thing about living in New York, I guess compared to LA, if we want to compare the two, is that New York is a place where you can put your head down and work. New York is a place where you can work really hard and you can get a lot done, and people recognize that. New York, yes, of course, there's always going to be the social ladder. Of course, there's always going to be events you have to go to, but that is not the name of the game here in New York. New York is about showing people what you can do and proving that you're a hard worker. And I enjoy that speed. I enjoy that environment for the same reason I enjoyed Atlantic. I prefer to have discipline. I prefer to be working really hard, because when I get to relax, I stop. So New York is really great if you consider yourself a hard worker. New York is really great if you consider yourself resilient. And New York is really, really cold. So you guys have an advantage, because a lot of my friends are from Florida here and they just complain the entire winter. So you guys will be fine if you need to come up here. It gets cold and it gets like blizzardy, but other than that, it is a really wonderful place to live. And yeah, I mean, it's quickly become my home. I think wherever I go for work, I'll always come back here.
We have rain coming back for another one.
Another one.
Hi again. So, was there a role you played that taught you an important lesson or impacted you heavily?
Yes. So I wrote down two. One is a theater role and one is a film role. I'll start with theater. I played Anne Frank, or Anna, at Open Stage 2 years while I was in high school. The first was my sophomore year of high school, and it was my first professional show. Before that, I had been in I was a dancer in Hairspray at Susquehanna Township High School. I had never really acted before. And I kind of surprisingly got put into this role with Open Stage. And other than the seriousness of the show and the history of it, which obviously leaves a huge impact on you, especially when you're learning about it a lot more in depth than you learn in the public school system, let's be honest, and in the curriculum about it. I learned through that show how much impact theater actually can have. I think we hear so much how much impact the arts can have that it almost becomes a cliche to us at some points, where we're like, yeah, but who's listening, And during both years that I did and The Diary of Anne Frank, the purpose of the show is that for a whole week you have morning matinees for 8th graders from around the state. They get bussed in from around Central PA and they watch the show, because that's when they're learning the World War II curriculum in their history classes. And I mean, none of us are that far removed from 8th grade. I'm sure we remember that you cannot put a bunch of 8th graders into an auditorium and expect them to be quiet. You can barely do that with 18 to 22-year-olds, let alone let alone 8th graders. So each show was rowdy. People reacted, people were talking, there were giggles when awkward things would happen on stage. But I remember so clearly the very first matinee of the first year I did it, when we did get to the end, and there were moments in the show where the Nazis appear and there is real fear and the history of it all sets in. And I will never, ever, ever forget realizing while I was on stage, I totally broke. I mean, realizing that for the first time in that entire hour and a half, the auditorium was completely silent, completely silent. There were hundreds of what does that theater hold? Like 500 people? There were hundreds of 8th graders and no one was talking. And that's when it kind of hit me of like, oh, like even people who do not actively seek out theater can be impacted by theater. And so that left a huge impression on me, and that has helped me keep out kind of that cynicism of like, who cares? Who's even going to see this? You know, every time I start to feel like that, I remember that like pin drop silent moment. And then it happened at every single morning matinee after that too. We'd get to a certain point and all of a sudden everyone would be quiet and totally listening and totally holding their breath for what's next. So that left a really big mark on me. And then another role, which you guys read about, I did a web series called Cheer Up Charlie. That's my own. I played the title character, and before I had played that part, on screen, I had only played like very shy, waited at their locker for the guy to come talk to them, which is fine, but it was like it was my type. It was what I was getting cast in a lot. And there was a lot of pressure to be cute and pretty and quiet. And I think that when I was on screen for Charlie, I mean, I wrote it for myself, so I knew it was going to be a lot more explosive than the roles I was used to playing. But the thing that I didn't realize was going to happen, and what kind of surprised me, was I learned that you do not always have to look good on screen. You do not, like, your hair does not have to be in place. You do not have to look beautiful. You do not have to keep your face calm so that there's no wrinkles or that you don't make like a funny, weird face. That role taught me that I can just throw how I look out the window while I'm on screen. And that's a lot harder to do when you're in front of a camera than when you're on stage. And so that was the first time where I was really able to just kind of like forget about what I looked like, have some snot hanging out if I had to, and do the scene. And that was probably the best experience I had on set. And I've been able to keep that way of thinking on each set that I've been on since, of like, not, because every second that you spend thinking about how you look doing something, that's wasted time. That's time that you're not focused on the person in front of you. That's time that you're clearly distracted because the camera catches that. So learning to kind of forget what I look like and accept faces or have some things happen that I wouldn't want on camera happen, accepting that has made the job so much less stressful and has made me 10 times more confident in myself on screen.
Thank you. Rain was on us this past spring.
Oh, really?
And we got shut down like 2 days before the first matinee.
Oh.
And then had to make a movie out of it instead.
I remember that.
So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you did that. I wonder if you found any of my notes that I left in the diary. I'm sure you did. Her 15-year-old Kara left some real wisdom there.
Our next question, I think Daryl was asking David that question. Yeah. Come on up, Daryl.
Hello.
My name is Daryl. I'm asking this question for Jade,
Okay.
and it's what's your favorite part of being behind the camera?
Yes. So, very simply put, my favorite part of being behind the camera is creating opportunities for myself and for everyone else around me. Cheer Up Charlie was my first project that I wrote and produced. So it was my first project that I was creating, not that I was joining someone else's, it was mine. I did it originally, I had a co-writer, and we had just graduated school. We had just graduated Atlantic, and we had the Broadway audition route pretty like right away. We graduated December 2017. We were fed up with the audition circuit by like March. And I kind of called him one day. I had gotten out of an audition for Dear Evan Hansen. I was at a callback, and the girl, and I was wearing like a blue shirt, long brown hair, and black jeans. The girl in front of me was wearing the exact same thing, same height, same hair. Girl behind me was wearing blue shirt, black overalls. It was just like, it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, all right, this is great, but can I just keep doing this and wait for one of them to hit and not do anything in the meantime? And the answer for me was no. So I got out of that audition. I called my friend Holiday and I said, look, we have this idea. We had the idea of this character from before. Like, I'm sick of waiting for somebody to give me an opportunity. You're sick of waiting. Let's create our own. And so it did start from more of a selfish place of like, I want a reel. I want to be working on something. I want to show everyone what I can do, because I don't want to just keep getting like, I'll audition for Dear Evan Hansen 10 times over, but I have to be doing something in between that. I have to be expressing myself and creating my own opportunities while I wait. And then from there, that experience of like creating an opportunity for myself and for my friend Holiday turned into like wanting to create opportunities for as many people as I possibly could. It became like, okay, we have these scripts and they're good and we have the ability to make them. So let's get as many people in on this that can benefit from it as we can. And then it became about like, who needs a reel? Who just graduated and needs really good footage? Who just graduated from Tisch and needs to be an assistant camera to a really experienced camera person? Who has never been on set before and wants to PA on a really low risk situation? So it became about creating opportunities. It went from this thing for Holiday and I to a 15-person cast with like a 20 to 30-person crew throughout the entire month, who very specifically were from underrepresented groups in film. So all of our crew was 90% women or femme identifying crew workers. Everyone in the cast was from an underrepresented group in film, so that you're talking about women, you're talking about Black, Indigenous people of color, you're talking about actresses over the age of 55, which you don't think about a lot, but they really don't have very many roles that aren't mothers. And you're talking about the LGBTQIA plus community. And so what I like most about being behind the camera, what I like most about producing specifically, is the ability to set people up in an opportunity they may not have had. I like matchmaking, and I like creating things that people can be proud of on their own right.
One of my favorite things about working here and teaching here is getting to have like real honest conversations with the students about things like that. It's very much an area of passion for them for the most part. And so we have a lot of honest conversations about the industry and like the pros and cons of the whole culture of the industry. And I think it's really helpful and it gives me hope, honestly, because like I mean, I can point to people like yourself who are like, well, I'm going to just go be the change I want to be. But also I see how unified they all are in wanting that for the future. And it makes me think like, well, maybe I can look back at my own life and experiences and go, oh, things have changed in the time from when I was 17 to now. But like, that doesn't happen passively. It happens because people actively grab it by the lapels and say, we're doing this now.
Yeah. There's this phrase that I've been hearing quite a lot lately that I think really encompasses that idea. And I mean, if you remember one thing from me talking, like, remember this, it's stop trying so hard to get a seat at the table. You know that phrase, a seat at the table? Stop trying so hard to get a seat at the table and go set up your own table. Go make your own table. Go make your own platform. Go make your own vessel for whatever you want to get out. Like, forget their table. Their table doesn't matter. If they wanted you there, you would have been there already. And you don't need to you don't have to go vouch for a seat where you'll be treated like a parity hire or you'll be treated like a diversity hire. You don't need that. Go create your own table and fill it with the people you want to work with. That's like one of the biggest ideas that's changed my life and how I work.
And then by the time they invite you, you'll be like, oh, I'm busy.
I'm busy. Oh, I have my own thing going on. Don't worry about it.
Finn has the next question.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you find that being an artist contributes to your activism in any way? And in art forms like theater, I myself have found it difficult to incorporate like my own activism into my art because theater is, I don't know, it's different than like visual art and like writing where it's not as personalized, I think. So have you had any like different experiences with that?
Yeah, so I think you are right. It is a lot. There are more ways to incorporate your activism and your personal beliefs and causes into your art as like a writer or a producer or a visual artist, because when you're doing those things, you control the messaging, like specifically the messaging of what you're trying to get across. I think when you're an actor, you don't get to control your messaging, right? You're put into something that someone else has written. But what you do have control over as an actor is who you choose to work with, what companies you choose to work with. Are you working on a diverse and equitable set? Are you working with a company that has always made it a point to give out grants? Are you working with you are not helpless as an actor. You don't have to take anything you get. You can be very specific about who you work with and why. And I really do believe that that is part of being an activist. Being an activist encompasses your whole life, right? Even when you're not specifically fighting for something in that moment, it influences how you move, it influences how you talk and who you talk to, it influences basically just how you present yourself to the world. And so every choice that you make in your career can be tied to what you're fighting for outside of your career. And for me, like, yes, of course, I had messaging in Charlie about some causes that I mean, it tackles the illegal cannabis industry and the criminalization of marijuana. It also tackles the healthcare system in America and how medical debt cripples us. Yes, like I have those messages, but there was also activism in choosing the crew. There was also activism in what they were paid. There was also activism in creating a safe set. So yeah, it's definitely a little harder when you're hired specifically as an actor, and specifically as a theater actor. But I think that like always reminding yourself that you have the choice on who you work with and what you work on, is very liberating, and it adds a lot of intention into the choices that you make.
Solid. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you guys are interested in like these types of topics. And yeah, I mean, like you just said, like CASA is such an open place for these kinds of discussions. I don't think I would have been so engaged if I had not switched out of public school and went into a school where I was allowed to like talk about these things openly with adults.
Well, even just talking to you today makes me so glad that we continue to create our own work here. I feel like I've learned a lot from that process because I came out of a training experience that didn't entirely emphasize that. I got to delve into some of that in other ways, but it just seems like it's always the right time to be doing that kind of work, and also for the future.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Corey to come up here for the next question.
Hi.
What is the moment that stands out to you the most during your activism? And did you learn anything from it?
Yeah. So I think that you guys saw some of the videos I made for a company called Overthrow that had to do with marches. A little backstory on how that began. I have been marching here in New York since June 2nd. And we are still going. It's daily here in New York. Today,
I know. I think that was
hello.
Hey, we're back.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah, I think our Wi-Fi got a little sketchy there for a second.
That's okay. When did I cut out?
It was like right at the beginning, so you can just.
Okay. I started marching here in the city on June 2nd. We have been marching pretty daily since then. It's still happening, and it's mid-October, so it's been a while. It has become an everyday thing for me. Specifically, basically what's happened here in New York is it's the perfect storm of unemployment and a lot of free time. So there are a lot of people who woke up socially while they were in quarantine and then had the time to just go out and march every single day. And that's basically how I began. One of the biggest turning points for me in terms of a specific moment that you asked about was one of the speakers at just one of the marches started talking about energy and the value of your personal energy. And we had this conversation specifically about how at protests there are, there's a lot of screaming at cops. Like, let's be frank, there's a lot of screaming at cops. Yeah, exactly, yes. But the conversation shifted towards the worth of your energy and how important it is to make sure you are spending it correctly and spending it in a way that is going to be sustainable and actually work towards change. And so I did have this moment where we were told, like, yeah, it feels really good to scream at that cop sometimes because we're all pissed, right? It feels really good. Does that person deserve your energy? And will that person change? If you're fighting a system and you're pointing all of your energy at this one person that's following orders in front of you, is that going to create the change you want to see? And so that moment for me really changed how I was showing up. And that's when I started to document. That's when I started to find my role specifically in this New York City protest scene. So since then, I've been working with a few different organizers. Those were the only ones that were like branded content. That's what I sent you guys, because that I can call mine. Everything else I just give directly over. So it's a lot of, getting different types of cameramen there and like working with them to get all of the routes so that we're at the right place at the right time to document it. And I've also started TikTok. It's growing pretty big. You guys can check it out. But it's basically a protest coverage as well. And getting that to go viral. And the purpose that I found in that and like how I'm spending my energy within the movement is that obviously the news is not out anymore with us. There was a shift after probably the first 2 months where it became clear that the people had to be their own media. The people had to be their own news source. They had to get it out. We had to get it out ourselves of what was going on. And so yeah, I think one of the biggest moments for me was that check-in of like, how are you using your energy and where are you pointing it to? And since then, I've been using it to document and get out what's going on, since the news won't do it. I've done it for organizations, and those will definitely turn into like archival footage and stuff like that, like proof basically. But the TikTok that I run, basically it's grown quite a bit, and it is basically, in the first week of June, you went on TikTok. I'm assuming you all have TikTok as well because you're the actual age for it. You go on and it was all BLM content. And then after like 2-3 weeks, the algorithm stepped back in and it, covered it all up. So my job has been to basically screw the algorithm and get these videos to take off, which I've done pretty successfully so far, some better than others, but get these videos to take off so that they keep showing up and it keeps elevating consciousness and it keeps reminding you like, oh, that's still happening every day, because so many cities across America are there. It's not happening every day anymore. So that's one of the biggest things that I've learned specifically in this BLM movement, this wave of it. I was also living in New York City in 2016 when those protests were going, the summer of 2016. And that's where I originally learned the idea of not always having to be a leader, because obviously I am not going to go lead a BLM protest. I learned what it meant to show up and listen to the most marginalized and follow their leadership and not impose your own ideas, your own wants, your own opinions on how things should go. I learned how to humble myself and show up and say, okay, where do you need me? What do you need? And I think that that's part of becoming an adult as well, that lesson, but I learned it specifically within the protest space.
Thank you. We got, I think like 1 or 2 more here. 3 more. We're kind of at time, so it's up to you if you want to continue.
Oh, I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll go for the 3 more. They're good ones at the end here. Finn is back for the next question.
Hello. Which one is it? Okay. As a queer person myself, I found that a lot of what I've been through and experienced because of my identity has allowed me to pour myself into my art more. Do you find yourself as a queer person, like, has that kind of bled into your art at all, or like what art means to you?
Yes, it absolutely has. First of all, you are brave for being out as a teenager in high school. Anybody else who's listening, out or not, like, you are brave as well. I was not. I did not come out in high school. I heard a phrase the other day, it's less about coming out, it's more about letting in. I don't know if you guys have heard that. I heard that for the first time the other day, and that's I really loved that. But that did not happen for me in high school. That happened to me, I mean, publicly, it actually only happened for me last year. But it really only started to happen for me as I moved here to New York. And so, yes, absolutely. Queerness exists in all of my writing, whether the story centers around it specifically, or whether I really enjoy just having queer characters where that is a part of their personality, but not the main objective of the story. That is something in Charlie. I mean, I only sent the pilot. I don't know if it was, if it got to, but you never have a moment in Charlie where it's like, Charlie's bi. You just see it. You see it by who she starts dating, and you see it throughout the season. It's never a plot point, but it is a huge part of that character. And so I do have queerness in everything I write. And I write a lot of coming of age. Most of my protagonists are from 15 to 20. Charlie was 20. She's the oldest character I've really written as a protagonist. And for me, it's really special to write surrounding queerness and exploring queerness in that space, because I never really had those experiences. I didn't allow myself to have those experiences. So I do feel like there are some times where I kind of get to go back and write the experiences I wish I would have let myself had. It's more than just writing. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. It's more than just writing. When you're producing, and like, producing is like a big scary word. So I would say, really, like, anytime you organize anything, whether it be book club, like if you organize a book club, that's producing. Anytime you're creating a space that other people are coming to, I do think that being queer has made me more aware of the spaces that I create for others. I do think that I take it as a very personal responsibility to make sure the spaces I'm creating are safe. And that doesn't mean timid. Safe doesn't mean like we all dance around like the meat of things. It means that, like, when you show up to a space that I create, there will be other people that you can relate to, and you will not be ostracized. And so, yeah, I think that being queer, and I think that being a part, like being a more active part of the community now than I was when I was just keeping it to myself. It affects everything that I do creatively.
Thank you.
In case I forget, since I've known you since you were, I think, 15 or so,
Yeah.
it's just, I'm very proud of you for the journey that you've been on.
Thank you.
And it's not, I didn't like actively think when I knew you back in high school, oh, Kara should absolutely be a producer. But as soon as I saw you making a foray into that world, I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think you're a natural for that kind of work, and it's exciting to see you taking the reins yourself and doing that. I think that's just absolutely
Thank you. I appreciate
fantastic. So, Elira's up next.
Hi again.
that.
Okay, so what are your long-term goals, like shooting towards your career and future?
Cool. So I have I'm gonna split these into two separate answers. I'm gonna answer my career, and then I'm gonna answer my future, because I have recently learned that it's important to sometimes separate those answers. Career-wise, my biggest goal right now is I would like to go to Sundance and Tribeca in the next 5 years. I don't care how I get there. I don't care if it's as an actor or as a producer or as a writer. That's where I want to be. I've found that I went through a film festival circuit in 2019, and I found that I really enjoy the film festival circuit, and that I enjoy and that I want to take the film festival circuit path as a way to get further into my career. There's a million different ways you can do it. I've chosen film festivals, and so my biggest career goal right now is Sundance in the next 5 years. My biggest career goal, like very long term, is as an artist, I would like to support myself financially doing what I love. I want to eventually be able to shed the survival jobs, and that is success to me. That, like, when I think about what it means to me specifically, this will change. There is no set thing of success as an artist. You have to find your own version of success as an artist. And for me, it's going to be supporting myself financially. So that does not mean that I need to be at some big name place. That does not mean that people need to even know my name. It means that I want to be able to spend the vast majority of my time doing what I love, which is producing and writing and acting, and not have to go work a retail job. To me, that would be the greatest success I could find. In terms of like my future in general outside of my career, I think, Corona, I was working 4 jobs before Corona as well as producing. And I went to having like these full days of nothing. I'd never experienced that probably since I moved here to the city. And it forced a lot of artists to look at who you are when you're not creating, when you're not actively working in your career field, who you are outside of that. And my goals in life are, I want to fall in love and get married. I want that really, really bad. I want to be able to volunteer a lot. Like specifically at like animal shelters, because I love pit bulls, but also within the community. I found this summer I love doing community cleanups, and I want to be an active member of whatever community I live in. So those are kind of like my big life goals. And I think that as artists, we deeply, deeply tie our personalities and our identities to our work. to what we create, to our output, to what we're casting, to what we're doing. And I just think that for the first time this year, because I was forced to sit in this room in quarantine for a few months by myself, I learned who I was outside of that a little bit more. And so I would definitely encourage you all, like when people start asking you like, what do you want to do in 5 years? You don't have to tell them the personal ones, but like make sure you make the personal list for yourself that has nothing to do with this industry, or else you'll just get caught up in just industry things and you'll forget to keep working towards the personal things that you want for yourself to make you happy.
Right. And oh yeah, lastly, I like putting this at the end.
Yeah.
The chance to look back.
Yeah.
Jonathan has the last question for us.
Okay.
Well, I guess you can see it on the screen, but if you could go back to and see your 16-year-old self, what would you tell her, or what would you like to tell 16-year-olds in general that are approaching this year?
So this was the hardest question for me. I sat and I wrote answers to these, and this was the hardest question for me to answer. I came up with two things that I would want to tell myself. The first one is more pointed directly at myself, but I think you can find something from it. And then the second one is a little more general to what I would say to all young adults that are about to embark on their own journey. So the first one is I was obsessed with being quote unquote the best at what I was doing. I was obsessed with it to the point that it made me absolutely miserable anytime I could find any shred of proof that I was not the best. What I would say to 16-year-old Kara is that there is no such thing as being the best at something. There is no such thing as being the most talented in the room. There is only being the right fit. You cannot be the best. You can just be the right fit. And in order to be the right fit, you have to work really, really hard and be ready to go when the opportunity is handed to you. But being the best will never get you anywhere. It's about so much more than being number one, because they're really, the big secret is there is no number one. There's no number one. The second one is that I wrote it on my phone. Independence isn't this big gift that the universe gives you when you move out and turn 18. It's something that you have to earn, and then you have to learn how to maintain it. Keeping your independence takes hard work, but the payoff is huge. I thought it was just going to be a party. Independence is not handed to you. Independence is something that you can go and you can claim for yourself. And once you do it, once you get there, it feels really, really good. So those are the two things I would tell 16-year-old Kara.
Thank you, Kara. This is very powerful and impactful, and I just appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness so much. I'm going to ask these guys to acknowledge you with a round of applause. And thanks.
Thank you guys so much for the questions. They were awesome.
And we'll feel free to stay in touch with us, and we'll feel free to keep following what you're doing, certainly. But
sure. If you're on TikTok, here's my handle. Are you ready?
Yeah. You said the magic word.
Yeah, I know. Okay, you ready? KGM, like Kara Grace Miller, KGM PLS, like the abbreviation for please. And it's just a black circle. There's no avatar. Got it? All right, awesome.
All right, we'll wave bye.
Okay, bye everybody. Have a good day.
Oh my God,